Hi, welcome to the Black TV Show podcast. I'm your host, Miriam. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Miriam. I work in the film and TV industry here in Canada. We just wrapped up a show. I guess now it's been like over a month from the network CBC, which is Canadian Broadcast Corporation. We finished off filming Burner of Truth season 4. If you've never heard of the show, you should check out season 1, 2, and 3 on Netflix. And season 4 is actually airing next week. It's not a black show, but it's a great show to watch because it talks about the Indigenous people here in Canada. So you should check that show out, coming out next week. Also, another fact about me is I love black TV shows. Anybody that knows me really well can tell you how much I love black TV shows and black movies and just black entertainment in general. Like, I just love it. And especially about the Cosby Show, it's my favorite show of all time. And that is the reason why I created this podcast, because I felt like this is a great outlet for me to speak about a topic that I love, that sometimes, when you say the same thing over and over to your friends, they start to be like, okay, I understand, it's your favorite show. So it's a great way for me to do this in this way, in this outlet, and sharing my love for black TV. And I'm hoping that you have that same love that I have for it. So we are going to get into this episode, which is season 1, episode 6, Breaking with Tradition. The date of this airing of this episode was October 25th, 1984. So as I said, I guess there won't be a Halloween episode in this season. I believe there will be one in season 2. So we start off in the living room, and Claire calls for Rudy, and Rudy, like, she tells Rudy to hop down. So she's like, hop, 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 and I'm like, she wasn't literally asking you to hop. She just, but I guess she took it very literally by actually hopping down the stairs. And she's taking Rudy and Vanessa shopping for shoes. At this point, I thought when they were leaving, I thought they had their own car to go there. So later on, I kind of got confused by when they started talking about the taxi. So we'll get to that when we get there. And Theo is trying to leave the house to go play basketball. And Cliff is like, "Where's my $5 from last week for your pizza?" He's like, I don't have it. And first of all, oh my god, $5 for pizza? Whew! You don't hear about that nowadays in 2020, or in 2021. So it's very cheap pizza, I guess, for us if we got that right now. Cliff was like, okay, well, if you're not paying me back, now you gotta pay me back. So he has to clean the table off and put all the dishes in the dishwasher, as Claire mentioned to Cliff that he had to do. So he kind of put that on on Theo because he didn't pay him back that $5. Cliff mentions that he delivers so many babies and he is so tired and he just wants a chill day. And so he tells Theo that he has to, if anyone calls, you gotta just tell them that I am having a chill day and I don't want to see them or nothing. The doorbell rings and Cliff was like, I don't want to see anyone, right? And so during this time, he's trying to get some snacks. So he gets all these bags, and one is like pretzels, and there's like crumbs of it, chips, which is more crumbs of chips, and then walnuts, which there was only a few left. So basically all the kids ate up all the snacks. And so Theo comes back in, and Cliff is asking who's at the door. And Theo's like, my grandfather, which is Cliff's dad. Theo told him that he can't come in because Cliff is trying to have a chill day, basically. And Cliff isn't happy. He like asks him again. He's like, "Who was at the door?" And so my dad, And so he runs out to like call out for his dad, and he's not there. And he's just not happy, and he tells Theo, like, "Are you stupid? Like, how do you not allow your grandfather in the house. And I understand Theo, like, you told him not to let anyone in the house, but at the same time, that person is your family. Like, I feel like common sense, you should let that family member in. I think he was more talking about like friends that don't let other, or just neighbors or any other people, but like, how do you just kick out your grandfather, right? The phone rings, and I noticed that the phone was on the table, by the, like, if we were watching it by the left side. If you look, in future episodes, you're gonna see that phone behind the couch. I noticed that that detail has changed. I guess, I can't really say this is a continuity error. I think this is just that, people move phones. At the time, there was no cell phone, so it's like one phone, so sometimes you gotta move it around just to be comfortable. So that's the one thing I noticed with this scene. And it's, Theo's grandpa on the phone, and Cliff is like, "Oh, unless, like, he's like, he's trying to get the phone, and he's like, unless you're planning to slam this phone, like, here." And so Cliff, picks up the phone and says, like, "Where is he?" And he's like, "I'm at the neighbor's house." And so Cliff tells his dad that he needs to come to the house. We'll open the door for you. And so here we come and we see Russell Huxtable, who is Cliff's father. We're going to be learning a lot about him throughout the seasons. So he tries to come in and, like, in the door, but like he like puts his foot up in and then puts his foot out. He's like, "I don't know if I'm too scared to come in." And Cliff was like, "Oh, we're playing jokes and all that stuff." And so they sit down, and Cliff and Russell's watching TV, and Russell asked about Sandra being in Princeton. So this is the first time we're hearing about Sandra. As I said, in episode 1, you remember that clip where, Cliff is like, or sorry, Claire was saying, "Why do we have 4 children?" And Cliff says, "Because we didn't want 5." At this moment, that statement does not make sense with this scene or this episode, or just, I guess, just with the whole series. So that is a major continuity error. It's so weird. Now that I work in film and industry, I realize, like, I really pay attention to those continuity stuff. There's a reason why there's a continuity person on every show, to make sure that the story makes sense, it aligns and stuff. So I just noticed that. Maybe I'm very picky on that. But so we find out that Sandra is at Princeton, and she got this semester, she got 4 A's and 1 B. She's doing well. And Russell asks, about Denise, where she wants to go, and he mentions that, she wants to go to Princeton, Howard, and like a few others. And just to let you know, Howard is HBCU, which is a historical Black college, which is actually in real life is where Felicia Rashad, who plays Claire Huxtable, went to for college, and same with her sister Debbie Allen. And so Russell was like, "What about Hillman?" And this is the first time we're hearing about Hillman. We're gonna be hearing a lot about Hillman, and then especially once I decide we start talking about a different worlds. Hillman is like the life, basically. So Hillman is it's also a historical Black college, university, so HBCU, but it's not a actual real like, it's not a actual real university, but they made it up for the show. And Russell, mentions that, he graduated from Hillman, and like Cliff was like, "Well, I know that because I also graduated from Hillman also." And he mentions, like, it's the oldest school in the state. And I was looking it up. Hillman is roughly supposed to be in Virginia, but we never know where exactly in Virginia the college is at. And so Theo comes in, and starts eating on snacks that Cliff was trying to eat. And Russell asks Cliff, "Where are you sending Theo?" And Cliff was like, "To high school." Because basically we know that, Theo's grades are not great, so I guess he just doesn't know where exactly, like, as long as he can graduate high school, then we'll see. And then Russell asks Cliff how much he's paying for Sandra's schooling. And he hesitates a bit and he says $10,000, but that's without books. And this, I was trying to like understand like $10,000 a year or $10,000 for the whole degree. And I think by the end of this, I realized he's talking about $10,000 a year. So that's like about 40,000, but then plus books, so around 50,000. And so he asked, what is Sandra majoring? And he mentioned liberal arts. I've never actually heard of liberal arts. Like, let me know if you've heard of that kind of major. I know there's an art major. Like that's a normal major that I've heard of. So Sandra doesn't, and also Russell asked, like, what does Sandra want to be? And, Sandra doesn't know what she wants to be. And Russell says, so she's going to school to be a nothing. I love that statement. That's funny. Russell says you can be a nothing and get a 4-year degree for only $10,000 at Hillman. But, she decides to go to Princeton, and now Cliff is paying over $50,000. And he tells this to Theo, like, trying to get to influence Theo to go to Hillman. And so we move we move up to Denise's room. And she is, listening to music while studying, and she's studying the French Revolution. And Cliff mentions, at a time where, there was no heads. So I'm assuming, I don't know much about the French Revolution, but I'm assuming, I guess their heads were cut off based on what Cliff was talking about. I don't know. He wanted to talk to Denise about, which colleges she wants to go, and she mentions the same colleges that Cliff mentioned to Russell earlier, so it hasn't changed. And then Cliff asked her, like, what about Hillman? And she's like, I don't know. And like Cliff is like taken aback. Oh my god, why would you say that? Like, and so she's like basically saying like Hillman's a place where if you don't get into your top your university or college, you end up there. And like, so she really made it like as if it's like a a community college, like a lower class college, which is pretty sad. Like, once you watch A Different World, you want to be there. Like, you want to be at a HBCU. So Cliff starts talking about the same story that Russell was saying earlier. I noticed in this episode, like Russell would say a story and then Cliff would say a story, like it would repeat. And so and and then Denise was like, oh, I'll just stay here and wait till he leaves. And Cliff was like, no, he was in war, and that he waited and waited and waited to shoot someone, and then by the time he wanted to shoot someone, the war was over. So basically his point is that he will not leave until he talks to Denise. So now we get into Act 2. As I say, this is after a commercial break because, back in the day, there were commercials. Well, not back in the day. We still got commercials when we watch cable TV. But, with Amazon Prime, like, just continuation. So, we get back to the living room, and Russell is sleeping on the couch, and Denise is like, I don't want to wake him up. And Cliff is like, he's awake. And so they tap on him, and Russell's eyes, like, open up right away, and he's happy to see Denise and tells Cliff to go away, but he doesn't really go away. He like goes and sits at the chair behind them. Denise mentions that she doesn't really want to go to Hillman, and Russell's like, we don't want to force you to go to Hillman, but we want you to go because that you want to go. But it's a great institution, the fact that your dad went, and Cliff was like, I didn't even have a choice to go. I had to go. And Russell's like, okay, well, even if you didn't have a choice, like, you would say Hillman's a good school. And Cliff was like, yeah. And because of the institution. And he's like, no, because of Claire. And Russell was like, what? And he was like, yeah, Claire is an institution itself, that and he mentions that the school is, outnumbered by men by 8-1, and all of a sudden Denise's eyes light up. She's like, "What, Hillman?" Like, she's not like now down to go to Hillman. I have no idea if that's true, because in a different world, I don't recall it being like more men. I don't know. I kind of now need to rewatch A Different World to see um, if that's true. I know because Debbie Allen changed up the show, it might be different. I have no idea. Yeah, so he ends up following Claire to Hillman, and Claire does not know that that was the reason why he went to Hillman. And Russell really, really wants to tell her now and like say that. So I'm gonna mention this. There's another continuity error. So Cliff mentions that the only reason why he went to Hillman was because Claire went. But in later episodes from the fourth season, Claire reveals to Vanessa and Rudy that Cliff was at Hillman while she was in high school. So in later seasons, we'll notice that like they mention that there's about I think like a 3 to 4 year gap between Cliff and Claire in terms of ages. So there's this statement of saying, the reason why he went is to follow Claire. So when you're saying it that way, you're saying that they're the same age. So this is basically a major continuity error. Of course, this is season 1, so things change after season 1. With a lot of shows, I feel like that's what happens. Where the first show you just like throwing things out and then seeing how the storyline will continue. So this is an error on the show. And then Theo is done his chores, but he forgets to put the dishwashing soap in the dishwasher, so he has to go back and add that. And Cliff goes back with him to help. And Claire and the girls come back, not happy from shopping. And Rudy tries to throw Vanessa's book out of the window, and Vanessa tries to throw Rudy out of the car. And then the cab driver was trying to throw all of them out of the car. So I didn't understand why they had a cab driver. It just didn't make sense, because that they have we're gonna know that they have a vehicle throughout the seasons, because they talk about it. But it was weird to hear that they took a cab. I'm not sure. Maybe because they were going to Times Square or something. I have no idea. And then Russell is trying to tell Claire about the story. Cliff comes in with, not with, there was a bat randomly sitting behind the couch. I'm like, who just leaves a bat right there? But whatever. So he comes and starts screaming. He's like, ah, and can't even do it. He's like so loud and trying to hit him with the bat. And then out of nowhere, there's like a racket on the left table where the phone was. And Russell grabs that, and they start like fighting with the racket and the bat, and then they end up in the kitchen, and Claire is just laughing. She's like, "Oh my god, this is crazy." And Denise asks Claire, "Is it true that the men outnumber the women, 8-1?" And she's like, "Yeah, but 7 of them are not really great, but the 8th one, whoo, they're great." That's such I love how real she was when she was saying that. And then we get back to the kitchen, and basically Russell tells Cliff the same story that Cliff told Denise about, him being in the war, and he was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to shoot someone, and then the war was over by the time. Clearly, Cliff learns a lot from him, because clearly he keeps talking about the same story. So the one thing we learn about Russell in this episode is that, he fought in war. We're going to find out in other episodes that, he was also a jazz musician. So I want to mention that, Russell was played by oh my god, I'm going to say this wrong. Earl Hyman. I believe that's how you say his name. He has done so many productions. He acted since 1945, so it's been a long time. He's done Macbeth and Julius Caesar, which are the Shakespeare's plays, and which comes up in season 3, which is crazy to me, because they talk about, I can't remember I believe it's Julius Caesar's that they start reenacting in season 3, but it's crazy that it got brought up. So that was pretty cool to see. And then the fact that he did pass away November 17th, 2017, at age 91 in New Jersey, which is crazy because in this episode, Theo mentions, because Cliff tells Theo, you need to get my father back. And he's like, he lives in New Jersey. And he's like, yeah, you gotta go all the way to New Jersey. So it's crazy the fact that, he actually passed away in New Jersey. I do on every episode, I do a lesson of the episode, which the reason why I do it is because I believe that I learn, especially from the Cosby Show, I learned a lot of lessons. Because I started watching this show when I was a kid, and I actually learned a lot. The lessons I learned came from the show majority of the time. I always refer back to the show whenever something comes up in my personal life. So I believe that, we learn a lot from these sitcom shows, which I feel like you don't learn much nowadays with some of the shows that we watch, which is pretty sad. So the lesson for this is it's good to learn about different post-secondary schools from family members, but you are the one to choose the university or college that you want to go to. You should never be influenced by someone to say that you got to go to certain places, just like how right now what Russell is doing. Like, it's great that he can explain like what life is like at Hillman, but it's ultimately Denise's choice. Of course, we know that Denise ends up going to Hillman, but if she didn't, it would have been ultimately her choice. The question I have for you guys is, have you ever been pressured to go to a certain college or university because your parents were alumni, or they've been told that that was a good school to go to? Let me know on Instagram at a Black TV Shows pod. And also let me know on Twitter, which is also the same thing, Black Shows, a Black TV, oh, that's not good, Black TV Shows pod, and using the hashtags Breaking Traditions and hashtag HBCU. I am starting a new segment every Thursday, which is a Black Show of the Week, which is me talking about showcasing a Black show that I love, that I want you guys to see, that is just great television right there. So, because we were talking about Hillman so much this episode, and I also mentioned this show multiple times, we might as well talk about A Different World. It's a different world. Ooh, and where it come from? Yes, it is now. Yeah. Yes, the spin-off show of The Cosby Show, which is A Different World. It's by far, I think, my second favorite show. It was a groundbreaking show, to say the least. It went on for 6 seasons, from 1987 to 1993. It focused the life of the students at Hillman College, which is a fictional historical Black college that was in Virginia. We don't know exactly where in Virginia. They never say exactly where it is. And season 1 was more focused around Denise, which was, leaving, the Cosby Show to come on to A Different World. But then after season 1, she left the show because she got pregnant, or Lisa Bonet got pregnant, and Mr. Cosby didn't feel that it was right for Denise to be an unwed mother, pregnant, or having a child while being in college. So she left the show. Debbie Allen actually kind of pushed for it, but it just never went through. And also after season 1, Debbie Allen came in because Mr. Cosby and other producers were realizing that season 1 didn't really portray the real life of an historical Black college. So they brought Debbie Allen because she had experience at being at HBCU. She graduated from Howard University, just like Felicia Rashad, as I said earlier in the episode. And she really revamped it. It looked like a different show, I mean. And I feel like if it wasn't for her, this show would not have continued on after season 2. That's what my belief. So here are some of the people that were on the show. Of course, there was Lisa Bonet for season 1 as Denise. Jasmine Guy, she played Whitley Gilbert with that, accent, country accent. Fun fact, she auditioned 3 times for the show. Did the first 2 auditions didn't work out. The third one, she used that accent and she got the job. That's you never really hear those stories, which it's great to hear that that was an actual thing. And then, of course, Kadeem Harrison, who plays Dwayne Wayne. He was in the last episode that we were talking about in A Short Story. As I said, he was in limbo for a few years until he got this job. So good on him. Daryl Bell plays Ron Johnson. Sinbad plays Walter Oakes, and he also was on the Cosby Show. And he'll be, I believe, in season 2. I believe. I don't quote me on that. I get my episodes kind of mixed up together. Charnel Brown. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She played Kimberly Reese, and if there was a reboot of A Different World, she would be Dr. Kimberly Reese. And then there was Cree Summer, who plays Freddie Brooks, and guess what? I always have to mention this when there ever is a Canadian on the show. She was not born in Canada. She was born in Los Angeles, but she grew up in Saskatchewan. So yeah, you gotta shout that out because her father was Canadian, so she has some Canadian roots. So I just wanted to shout out. There was a half Canadian on A Different World. And then there was Glenn Truman, who plays Colonel Bradford Taylor. He actually is currently on the Netflix movie Maz Rainey's Black Bottom with Chadwick Boseman. You should check that out. It's another great black movie. Lou Myers, who plays Vernon Gaines. AJ Sanders, she plays Gina DeVoe. She did such a great job on the show. Oh, I kind of wish I wish I've seen her in other shows. Recently I saw her on an episode of Malaysia, but that's all I've seen her in, and I'm sad about that. I kind of wish she did. Well, I was gonna say I wish she could have done more, but I feel like I wish more directors and producers would have taken her and she her comedy, her I don't even know I don't have words. I'm just she was amazing, and I just wish there were producers and directors to have hired her onto their I could see her in a rom-com. I could see her just in general comedy movie, a comedy show, a sitcom like A Different World. She's so funny. I love her. And then, of course, there was Jaden Pickett Smith, who plays Lena James. And according to one of the episodes, she was named after Lena Horne, who happens to be a guest star on the show also. And then there's Karen Mullane. Wait, I'm so bad at names. And then she played Charmaine Brown, who her character was actually created on the show, The Cosby Show. We'll see her in later seasons. And then she kind of carried over onto A Different World. Also, her boyfriend on The Cosby Show was also who played Lance, Alan Payne. He was also offered to come on to A Different World, but he declined because he wanted to be in movies. So it's on him. I kind of wish he was on A Different World. He's very funny. Like, I loved him. I loved him then. I loved him now on House of Pain, but he declined and did movies. And also the one thing about Karen is, if I don't know if a lot of people know this, if you've seen The Proud Family, she is Dejanay, like Dejanay Jones. Like, isn't that crazy to think like she played that character, but she plays that character so well. So I just thought, side note on that. Sorry, it kind of got sidetracked right there. Then there were some notable guests. Of course, there was the late great Diane Carroll, Patti LaBelle. Those two played the mothers of Dwayne and Whitley. Tisha Campbell, who was in the HIV/AIDS episode. She was the one who actually had HIV. She played that character very well. I always think of Tisha as like a funny, outgoing person, but she really played that part really well. and it's hard to play that kind of character with, as it's such a tough topic. And at that time, this was like when the epidemic was at that time. So good on her on playing that character. Halle Berry was in one of the episodes. In Vogue, Whoopi Goldberg, who also was on the HIV/AIDS episode. David Alan Grier, James Avery. I should say the late great James Avery and the late great Lena Horne. Jesse Jackson, Gladys Knight, and of course, the late great Tupac Shakur, who happens to be that this show was one of the only shows that he was on. He mostly did movies. He didn't really do TV, but this is the only like one moment that we've seen him on TV, and he did such a great job. And it was a reuniting of Tupac and Jada together as they were best friends when they were younger. So, I kind of wish he was like kind of like a supporting role, or he took on being the series, like being one of the main characters, but he did a good job. This is one of the shows that takes on topics that a lot of other shows wouldn't take on, especially being a sitcom. They really took on very serious topics that I love that they really showcase. And back then, they would always call this like a very special episode, and they would always have someone come on and talk and be like, just letting you know, we're gonna be talking about like a very deep topic, basically, and you might want your parents around, all that stuff, or you want to be together as a family so you can have a conversation afterwards. They don't do that nowadays on TV, but back in the day, that's how it was. So some of the topics that they did was date rape. That was in season 2 when Freddie almost got raped. And then there was colorism, which was in season 6 with Mammy Dearest. I didn't understand at the time what with Mammy, like I had to watch that episode multiple times throughout my life and be like, what are they talking about? But I kind of understood like the point of that episode. When I ever get to that episode, we'll talk about it. There was domestic abuse in season 5. Gina played this character so well. She was being abused on this episode by her boyfriend. And then there was sexual health, which was in season 4 with the HIV/AIDS episode with Tisha Campbell and Whoopi Goldberg being the guest stars. They talked about racism in season 4 when season 5 when his car was spray painted with the N-word. And they got locked up in jail because they fought the white guys. And that scene in particular from that episode, I actually reposted it during the time that last summer when the whole George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement happened, because I always look back to that and be like, I understand. We're still in the same, what Dwayne Wayne was talking about in the late 1980s is happening still today, and it's sad. I wish things have changed since then, but it hasn't. And then there's an episode where Whitley goes to like a expensive store, and she's being like watched by a saleswoman because she thinks that Whitley would steal something. So racially profiling, they have those topics in the series. There's gender equality, Kim getting belittled by her classmates when she's in med school, because at the time it was a male-driven field. Economic privilege, predominantly white institutions versus HBCUs, the Black identity, because Freddie in this series she is a half white, half Black person, and so she dealing with that. Interracial dating, when Kim and Matthew start dating. Matthew, of course, is white. Politics, like they talked about so many things. And then of course the LA riots when Whitley and Dwayne go on their honeymoon, and they actually talk about with Rodney King being the whole situation with him. And just so you know, I was not born before this time, so I didn't know about the whole Rodney King and the LA riots. I didn't know about it until I watched this episode. So I learned a lot from this series. It taught a lot, and with the LA riots, I had to rewatch that episode last summer when the whole Black Lives Matter movement happened, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like deja vu. Life is repeating itself, and it was saddening, and it saddened it just made me sad that this is the life we're still living, and hoping for change and all that stuff. And also to see the progression of the characters of the show, seeing them from season 1 to season 6, when they started off as freshmen and then going on to being uh, people, working people in society, with Dwayne Wayne being an engineer, Freddie applying to be a lawyer, and Kim being a future doctor. It's it's great to see that, and I see that within my own friends, and it's very relatable to see that. So after the show ended, it's been told that a lot of people decided to go to HBCU, and their reasoning for it is because of that show. And I love that that's the impact that A Different World has made on people. Thousands of people, the enrollment to going to HBCUs have gone up since the 80s, and if it was me, I would have gone to HBCU. Of course, I do not live in the States, so we don't have HBCUs, but it would be cool. It seems like such a fun experience, not only the education, but the weekend life, just the activities. It seems like it would be such a great time. So I bow down to Debbie Allen. She did an amazing job changing the show, and making it iconic. And the last thing I want to speak on is the theme song of A Different World. So there are 3 different theme songs. So season 1, the theme song was done by Phoebe Snow. I have no idea who she is, so I had to look that up. She is a white woman, a white person. It's not what this is a show about HBCU. Why is a white woman doing the theme song? I was very confused when I looked that up. I was like, what? Good on Debbie Allen for changing that, because I'm just like, and it was so like country. Like I was just like I don't think of a HBCU as being a country. Like it's like, yeah, I know it's the 80s, but it's just, oh my God. So I was just like, whatever. And so then season 2 to season 5, the theme song was sung by the late great Aretha Franklin. I know my parents loved me, stand behind me, come what may. I know now that I'm ready, yeah, for a finally heard you say it's a different world. Ooh, and where you come from, yes it is now, yeah. Here's our chance to make it. And if we progress on our goal, you can decide, we can take care. Hey, just remember that you and told. It's a different world. It's a different world. It's a different world. It's a different world. Where you come from. Ooh, and where you come from. I really love this version of her song. It's just her voice, and it just, I don't know. I have no words to say. It's an amazing. It's way better than the season 1 theme song. She does it perfectly. And then season 6, which was the last season, the Boyz II Men did that version. You could tell it has some 90s vibe to it, which I loved. And I'm glad that they changed it for the last season, because the show started in the 80s, but we went into the 90s, and we got to, with different decades, you got to change it up. So I really like the Boyz II Men version. So I like those 2. I just don't like the first season, and there's a reason why, because it's for an HBCU sitcom, like, no. You need black singers to sing the theme song. So, the show A Different World is on Amazon Prime, and you can stream it right now. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Talk to you guys next week, and we're gonna end off the show with the theme song by Boyz II Men for A Different World.